I guess there's a delusional expectation that in a democratic society, your leaders won't lie to you, but I hope we've all learned from history, especially the most, recent history, that these leaders will lie to us and they'll do stuff to get us into things that don't benefit the people. So of course today I am talking about, the push for war with Iran by the US mainly, but also by the UK, as seen by this morning when loads of conservative leaders and people wanting to be the next Prime Minister were tweeting about how Iran definitely did attack these oil tankers and were all attacking Jeremy Corbyn for saying we should, be cautious, we should see all the evidence. Because of course that is the most rational approach, because when people like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo has gone on to talk about how the CIA are trained to lie, they tell you that Iran attacked these, oil tankers. Why should we believe that? Why should we take it at face value? And surely we've become smart enough now, Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, this seems so similar to that, where the US said they were attacked by the North Vietnamese and they used that to justify escalating the war and putting US troops in combat roles in Vietnam. And then we have WMDs. People at the time who did not believe the Bush administration that Saddam Hussein had WMDs were called conspiracy theorists, the same way I think people like me right now will be called conspiracy theorists because we don't believe that Iran would have done this. So when dissecting an issue like this, you've got to think about who does this issue benefit the most, right? So Iran were hosting a meeting with the Japanese, and supposedly while they were hosting this meeting, they attacked 2 oil tankers, one which was owned by a Japanese company, and one that was a Norwegian one which apparently was running some cargo to Japan or something that was Japanese. I'm not sure exactly what it was. So we should believe Iran took the opportunity while the Japanese were in Iran to attack 2 things linked with Japan. On the other side of the spectrum, we have countries like Saudi Arabia, we have countries like Israel and the US who are actively pushing for war with Iran. And they are saying that Iran did this. They haven't provided any evidence to the public, but they're saying Iran did this. And who do you think we're going to believe in this instance? 3 countries that have been pushing for war with Iran for years, or Iran who would have just shot themselves in the foot if they did this? Where is the proof? And we can already tell the sort of narrative is melting when the US say one thing, but then the guy who owns the tanker says another thing, saying his crew members say they were hit by, what they felt was a torpedo, while the US said it was a limpet mine. So who's truthful here? The people who saw what happened on the tanker, or the US trying to manufacture war with Iran? Now why this is a rant and why I'm getting pissed off is because it feels like the lead up to the 2003 Iraq war, and I always think, I was a kid back then, I was like, what would it feel like to know that this was a lie, thousands of people were going to die, hundreds of thousands of people were going to die, and you're just sitting there and people aren't listening? Because I've seen numerous people on Twitter, just regular people, attacking Jeremy Corbyn for not backing the US assessment that Iran did this. How dense can you be? This isn't a right versus left issue. This is the rich in America, the rich in Israel, and the rich in Saudi Arabia pushing for a war with Iran for imperialist reasons. And you've got to delude yourself thinking it's anything other than that. Iran is a rogue state because it doesn't comply with the US hegemony. It doesn't sell America its oil. Iran has loads of oil, and oil that it hasn't even exploited yet. The Saudis, Israelis, and Americans are rubbing their hands together at the prospect of carving up Iran for themselves. And it also plays into the neocon ideology that Western culture, Western values, Western systems are the right way forward. The capitalist, free market, democratic system is what the whole world should have. And this applies to Iran, because let's not forget, the Bush administration actually planned to not only invade Iraq, but after that they were going to invade Libya, they were going to invade Iraq, and they were going to invade North Korea and replace their regimes with free market, capitalist style democracies. That was what they planned, and this is the fulfillment of this plan. Remember, Trump hired John Bolton and Mike Pompeo into his cabinet. They're the ones pushing for these things. And Trump is complicit too, because he's so in bed with the Israelis and the Saudis. Remember that Netanyahu took the Golan Heights off the Syrians, and he said, I'm going to name this new village after Donald Trump. Donald Trump is bypassing Congress, people calling for an end to the war in Yemen, because he doesn't want to jeopardise a weapons deal with the Saudis. Because there's obviously some financial incentive for someone like Trump to do something like that, because probably when he leaves office, the Saudis will be a nice new home for his businesses and stuff. And this is why Trump supporters are so fucking, stupid in a lot of ways, because Trump not only hires these people who led the US into war in Iraq, but he's so corrupt, he's obviously doing this for his own financial incentive. And then you have people like Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, whose family own, settlements on the West Bank and stuff, deeply in bed with the right-wing Israelis, and you think there isn't, more of a chance of these three countries colluding for war with Iran than Iran somehow doing this of its own initiative while they're hosting the Japanese? It's such a nice little coincidence. Wouldn't you think if you're going to attack two oil tankers, why would you attack on the day that you're meeting with a nation whose businessmen own this tanker? Why the hell would you do that? It's such a ridiculous narrative. And what I don't understand as well, where are all the Democratic politicians coming out and saying what bullshit this is? I haven't seen many of them. I've seen people like Bernie Sanders. Where is everyone else coming out and saying, let's have caution about this? Where is, the media reporting there has been no evidence properly given to the public that Iran carried out this? Why aren't more journalists doing their jobs and the news media scrutinising things like this? And it is, of course, we know why. It's part of the same arm, part of the same, I don't like using this term, but deep state, this whole entrenched system in America that exists to benefit people like this and uphold the status quo. And the news media plays a role in that, even whether it's CNN, whether it's Fox, whether it's MSNBC. They are all arms of the establishment in different ways because they won't challenge the official narrative. So like I said, through history, we know they are lying to us. I don't have any doubt in my mind that the US are either at least being disingenuous about what happened, or at most manufactured this whole thing and are the ones who actually targeted these vessels, because that would not surprise me. Because we, like I said at the start of the video, we like to think in this democratic society, people wouldn't do stuff like this. People, they wouldn't mislead the public. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I must be for even suggesting that the US would shoot a Japanese tanker to get war with Iran. But as history shows, it's not really far off from what they've done before. And at the time, was anyone challenging the Gulf of Tonkin resolution when it was passed into law? No one was, because they all believed the government. Most people who challenged the WMD narrative were silenced. People like Jesse Ventura were banned from the air. Other journalists who questioned it were banned. The White House made sure these people did not have a voice. There wasn't an anti-war voice on the TV because they didn't want anyone to challenge this narrative that Iraq supposedly had weapons of mass destruction, when of course they didn't. So there's two massive incidents where they're lying to you. There's little ones like the stuff in Syria, just swept under the rug recently, where Trump said the Syrians had done a chemical attack and then basically bombed Syria once and nothing else came out of it. There was no real scrutiny about that. And the people were saying the event that Trump said to justify this was really misrepresented so the US could do this sort of stuff. And I definitely believe it, because at the end of the day, the US is the biggest world power. It wants more power for itself. Countries like Syria and Iran don't fit into its control of the world. They don't allow US bases. They don't give the US their resources. So of course they're on the chopping block, and of course they are a target. So now let's get on to my point, how this whole conflict could set the world on fire. So on screen, hopefully right now, I'm showing you a map of the Middle East. So you have Iran, which borders on Iraq, and obviously is very close to Saudi Arabia. The Gulf of Oman is there. And then you have countries like Israel, which are border on Egypt, they border on Jordan, they border on Lebanon, and they border on Syria. And, the Afghanistan and Pakistan also border on Iran, which allow US troops to operate there. So Iran is basically surrounded by the US in terms of US military bases and everything. But let's see how this conflict could spiral out of control. So let's say next month, the US and the UK, maybe some other countries, they invade Iran. So they invade from Afghanistan, they invade from Pakistan, and they invade from Iraq, okay? And now let's think of the Middle East in terms of, I guess, more binary terms. So you have the people who are against the US interests, you have Iran, and you have Syria. So they're two big allies, Iran and Syria. Both Shia countries, even though Syria is ruled by the Alawite sect, which is sad, it's a different, sect of Islam. They are both Shia Islam. And then you have, the fundamentalist Sunnis in the Gulf, and you have other countries like Egypt, whether they would get involved, who knows. And then you obviously have US allies, the puppet government in Afghanistan, the puppet government in Iraq, which is also quite loyal to Iran as well. And then you obviously have Pakistan, which, quite friendly with the US as well. So that is what would happen. Let's say the invasion happens. But why I think this might set the world on fire is because Hezbollah in Lebanon were created with Iran's help, right? Israel clearly want a war with Iran. Israel will probably get involved in an invasion of Iran. Israel also want, the Golan Heights. They want to consolidate their territory. And with the right-wing government they currently have, they want to expand Israel even further. So if Hezbollah see the stuff in Iran happening, do they attack Israel, right? And then if Hezbollah attack Israel, does Israel invade Lebanon? Is there another, war with Lebanon in general, because, you know, the Lebanese army is obviously not a part of Hezbollah, but they might use it for justification. And does it spiral out of control? Because obviously Syria will back Iran in some way. Does Syria start fighting Israel? And then what does Iraq do? So, for example, there are many Shia militias in Iraq which are loyal to the Ayatollah in Iran. They've pledged loyalty to it. And the Iraqi government, a lot of them are in bed with Iran. And they legalise these militias, despite them carrying out like human rights abuses, massacring some Arab Sunnis in Iraq. So you open up something in Iraq as well, which, you know, is on the border of Iran. So does that plunge Iraq back into chaos? Because you have a group of people, a massive group of people in Iraq who are loyal to Iran. Do they come over to Iran to fight the US? Do they start attacking US bases in Iraq? Do they start attacking, you know, anything they've seen as Western? So that could open up the whole region. Like, look at the map right there. You have Afghanistan, which has ISIS and the Taliban in it right now. You have Iran right next to it. You have Iraq, and you have Syria bordering Iraq, and then you have Israel bordering Syria with Lebanon as well. So there's that whole little slice of the region. Does that all get engulfed into a new war, right? And that even goes without saying about, you know, what do Russia and China do, who are big allies of Iran and Syria, especially Russia and Syria? What happens with them? And then, like I said, look at the map as well. What do Turkey do, who have an interest in Syria because they want to crush the Kurds? Do you see how this could spiral out of control? Because the way we talk about Iran in terms of Western media, we might think about, you know, it's a bit isolated and on its own. It's the Islamic Republic. It's its own little thing. But it has links to all these other countries that could help make the region completely spiral out of control. And here's another thing I want to highlight as well. It goes deeper than the Saudis versus the Iranians. It goes deeper than the Shias versus the Sunnis. What it really is that Iran is a revolutionary Islamic republic. And what makes it different from, you know, the Gulf states is that although the clerics and the religious elite control Iran and the Ayatollah has, you know, the power, it is in part a democracy. So Muslim people in Iran and others do have a say in the running of the country. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states do not have this, and Iran, since its inception as an Islamic republic, has constantly criticised the Gulf states, saying, you know, where in Islam does it say the people must be ruled over by a monarchy? And that is a point of legitimacy in the Islamic world. Whether they're Sunni or Shia, it doesn't matter. Iran is basically, their whole thing is they're challenging the status quo of these Gulf states and all these Islamic monarchies, being like, the people should have some sort of say. You know, it should be an Islamic country, it should be controlled by the Islamic clerics, but the people should have some say, and that's what's revolutionary about it. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, the people don't have any say. The kings and, you know, the autocratic monarchies across the Gulf, they're seen as like good representatives of Islam, you know, people you should worship to be a good Muslim and stuff. But Iran challenges this whole notion, and even in Iran's terms, it's not completely binary. Iran, while it helped create Hezbollah, it also funded Hamas because it was against Israel. It also funds other groups that aren't strictly, you know, in their corner in terms of their theocracy and stuff. So it goes more than just, you know, Shia versus Sunni. It's revolutionary Islam versus autocratic monarchies controlling Islamic countries. And this is another place where it could pop up again and spiral out of control, because there was a big fear in Saudi Arabia in the 80s. And that's why they clamped down on these revolutions in places like Bahrain so hard, because they're scared of Bahrain and other countries like that becoming like Iran, becoming Islamic republics, rather than autocratic monarchies controlled by like a royal family. So to get to the final point, something I'm also really worried about, if there's a war of Iran, let's say it's a prolonged war of Iran, it goes on for ages because Iran is a massive country, it's very mountainous, and I'm sure it will inspire a lot of Muslim groups from around the world to come and fight on, you know, Iran's behalf, because it just looks like Western imperialists coming in and killing Muslim people. Whether or not, like I said, they are Shia or they're Sunni, it looks bad. And, you know, groups in Iraq, Afghanistan, they might all come into Iran to fight on behalf of the Iranians. But how does that affect Europe? So let's think about this. We have a refugee crisis in Europe, and it's not as bad as people make out in terms of the right wing, but think of all the fascists that have rose to power in Europe but on the backs of fear-mongering about this refugee crisis. Think about millions and millions and millions of Iranians coming for refuge in Europe, right? Maybe we could deal with it, maybe we couldn't, but think of how much that would galvanise the right wing. We see in Italy and Greece at the moment, you know, far-right groups getting into power, and in places like Austria. How much more do you think this will fit into their narrative if you get loads and loads of people from across these regions coming to Europe? And let's say with, you know, the way the Trump administration is handling the economy, let's say there's a recession in the middle of this. This is what I'm really scared of, and I think people need to wake up. If there's a war with Iran and an economic recession at the same time, Europe is seriously fucked in terms of the politicians that will take power in these countries. You think the 1930s can't repeat themselves? Well, they can. Refugee crisis, economic conditions, stagnant wages from neoliberal policies. That could all make a horrible mixture where far-right people could get into power in these countries, like properly into power. And that's what I'm really scared of. Of course, I don't believe, like Hillary Clinton, that far-right politicians only get elected because people are sick of refugees coming and taking their jobs or benefits. We all know the whole issue with the refugees is blown way out of proportion, because if the media didn't make such a big deal out of it, most people wouldn't care because it doesn't actually affect them. But this could actually affect them in terms of how many millions of Iranians, Iraqis, Syrians, all these groups coming to Europe, for example, coming to Greece, coming to Italy, coming to, even the UK. And it could become a legit issue on top of a propaganda issue where, look how many Muslims are coming to Europe. Elect the far-right politicians to preserve our Judeo-Christian values, a video on that coming next week. And that is what I'm really fearful for, just the galvanising of the right wing already based on the intervention in North Africa and Syria. How far would that go if all these regions were in conflict and, the refugees would suffer and everyone would suffer? Think of all the terrorism that would come to Europe. Iranian terrorism was pretty rife in the 1980s and stuff. The UK embassy, and it was at the Munich Olympics when the Israeli team was shot by Iranians and stuff. Think of that, but maybe times 10, times 100. Think of just general Muslims seeing this stuff in Iran. More homegrown terrorists and stuff. That's what I'm really scared of, and that's what these people don't think about, because it's a rich man's game. People in the US, if Iran is conquered, a puppet government is installed, all these things happen, who's going to benefit off it? Is it me or you? Is it the poor people? Is it random people in England? Is it random people in the United States? No, it is going to be oil companies, it's going to be defence companies, it's going to be whoever gets in there and privatises Iran's industries. That's who's going to benefit. It's going to be the Saudis who finally get their dominance over the Middle East with the US help. It's going to be the Israelis who get rid of an enemy who they've hated since its inception in 1979. And the Israelis might be galvanised to take over more territory in places like Lebanon and places like Syria. And that's who it benefits, the elites of those countries. It does not benefit anyone else, because war is for rich people. War and imperialist wars like this don't benefit anyone else. It's just going to hurt all of us. So please wake up. If you're a Trump supporter, if you're conservative, if you're anyone like this, please wake up. These wars are not fought for you. And Trump supporters in particular, especially poor ones in the Midwest, it's going to be your sons and daughters who are going over to Iran and dying for capitalism. You thought Iraq was bad. Go to a country which has a better military. Go to a country that has submarines. Go to a country that has a space program, has better missile technology. Go to a country that is way bigger. The terrain is more like somewhere like Afghanistan. It's going to be really impossible to win this war. So enjoy thousands of your sons and daughters going over to die in Iran for capitalism and for the ideology of people like Pompeo and John Bolton. Same people in Britain. If you're criticising Corbyn now, I hope you're the first people to sign up for the war in Iran, because that is what you should be doing if you're criticising someone who doesn't want to lead us into a war which it might, like I'm pointing out here, set the whole fucking world on fire. So this is a really long video, so I apologise for that, but I'm just really pissed off and I'm trying to outline all the ways in which this will really hurt the world in general. And I don't think I'm fear-mongering. I'm hoping something, cooler heads will prevail. I liked seeing yesterday on Twitter, Gulf of Tonkin was trending because people realise that this is complete bullshit. This isn't what is happening. Iran is not, even if it was attacking oil tankers and stuff, we know they're not telling us the whole story here. And whether I believe they are or not, and especially in this instance, I don't believe they are, we know that the US are not being honest with us. So please, please do not support people like Trump, people like Bolton, people like Pompeo, anyone who's warmongering with Iran. What the US has done to that country for its whole history, essentially, in terms of the US's history, they've just fucked it over. The same with the British. And the thought that now, because that government won't comply with them wholesale, it won't stop selling, weapons to Hezbollah or helping out of Syria or helping the Yemen rebels and stuff, because they won't do that, they deserve to be invaded, and you know, the whole world deserves to be pulled into this conflict. That will just hurt all of us. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Please like the video and share it if you want someone else to see this sort of anti-war message, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want to find me on social media, follow me at the Kavanagh on both Twitter and Instagram. I also have a WordPress blog. I've wrote about Iran a lot on it actually, so go check that out. I currently have a Patreon, and I just set that up to really get better equipment, maybe get a green screen, a better mic and everything like that. So if you're feeling generous or just want to check it out, just have a look. It's in my description. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.